welcome to Turn the Page, the official podcast of the Syosset Public Library.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Turn the Page. I'm your host, Jen, and I am here with a return author. Last year, we had her by to talk about her first book, and we even did a really great event in the summer. Now a year later, we're doing all again. So hello, welcome back. Please introduce yourself and your book.
Thank you so much for having me back. I'm so excited to be here. I'm Kelsey James. My book is Secrets of BRIAR Hall, and it tells the story of a society wife who hosts an extravagant dinner party. She lives in a mansion on Long Island's North Shore, and wakes up what she thinks is the next day and can't remember what happened at the dinner party, to a cold, dark house. Her husband is acting strangely. And it transpires something bad happened at the dinner party. And if she can't figure out what it is, she might be in danger herself.
It is such a fascinating setup. And, it once you pick it up, it really doesn't ever let go. Like from that moment when it all starts to go wrong, I kept I read it pretty much in a night because I was like, oh, I'll put it down when like there's a lull and then I'll go do some other stuff. And then that never happened, like in all the best ways.
I'm so flattered. I'm sorry to take up your whole night, but
It was great. And so, I'm really interested in your shift from Woman in the Castello to this project. I was wondering, were they written in that order? And also, what went into choosing the new setting and time?
Yeah, I love this question because this book has had kind of a long journey to publication. I actually wrote Secrets of BRIAR Hall first. It was originally had a different title. I started it like way back in, I want to say 2017, probably. And it was actually the book that got me a literary agent. So that was so my wonderful literary agent read it and signed me, which was a dream come true. And then, the next step was she was going to send me her notes to edit the book. And she spent some time with it and said, I really think there's a big thing we need to fix about this book. And so we had to kind of work through what the approach was going to be there. And I, was panicking because it was my first time getting an agent. And so in my panic, I wrote an entire other book, The Woman in the Castello. So that one came second, and then, finished revising. I ended up rewriting the entire first third of Secrets of BRIAR Hall, and then ended up with two books. So it was, it ended up being a very, very happy ending, but that's why it had sort of a circuitous path to publication, and so proud of how it turned out, and the edits were definitely needed, and was definitely made it a much stronger project.
Nice. That is so fascinating. And it really speaks to, I think, how undervalued like competitive procrastination can be as a tool for getting stuff done. This new setting is very close to home for us here in Syosset. It takes place on the Gold Coast, and you do a really beautiful job of historical world building, of bringing that era to life, and really evoking very visually, I think, like the architecture and the interior settings and stuff like that. So could you talk about what drew you to that period and what your research was like to bring those settings alive?
Yes. So on a personal note, my husband grew up in Cold Spring Harbor, and my in-laws still live there. So we spend a lot of time in the area. And that was sort of my first exposure to these, just as I got to explore the area, seeing these beautiful historic estates, on the Gold Coast, and learning the history. And, I think everyone knows Gatsby, but there's so much more to it. There's so much more history there. And so I did get to tour many of these estates. I would say one of the ones that probably had the strongest influence on the house in the book was Coe Hall and at Planting Fields. in terms of the look of the house. There's a few fun details. I don't want to spoil anything in the book, but there's one moment where Millie like hides in her husband's office. There's like a bar and a hidden panel by the fireplace. And the den at Coe Hall has a hidden bar like that. So also Teddy Roosevelt's house, the taxidermic specimens are very well known. He had quite a lot of them, and there are Millie's husband is a hunter, and so that both Coe Hall and Teddy Roosevelt's home that sort of influenced that element there. So there was a lot to draw inspiration from. Super fun. I mean, touring old houses for like someone who's a history fan is a lot of fun.
It is so much fun. And those are two such beautiful houses too. Every kid who grew up on Long Island spends a lot of time at Theodore Roosevelt's house, just sort of on like, you know, the annual pilgrimage, like field trips and stuff like that. And I love like just the writerly eye that you bring to observing certain details, you know, about the time. It's all really great. Could you talk a little bit about Millie? You mentioned her. And I'm super interested actually in how she both shares some really essential traits with Sylvia, your protagonist from Woman in the Castello, but is different in a lot of ways too. Like she has different privileges and different circumstances, but they have some qualities that resonate with each other. So yeah, can you talk about like crafting your new character and yeah, somebody who inhabits this world?
Yeah. So I think with Millie, I think a key difference between them is Sylvia is such a striver. Like she doesn't have anything. I mean, she's like a lot of the momentum of the plot is that she's trying to provide for her family and she is broke. Millie is fabulously wealthy, so comes from every privilege. But I think what they have in common is they're both constrained by the mores of the time. So Sylvia is an unwed single mother and feels that she needs to hide that from people so that she's not discriminated against in her work. And Millie has, even though she has every resource available, I don't want to, again, no spoilers, but finds how powerless she really is when she tries to, you know, take something to court, that the laws are not on her side. And I think that's a very important reminder. You know, I think there's still a lot of work to do. And, you know, it's a reminder of the corners women can kind of find themselves backed into, and we kind of see how she responds to that. So yeah, and I think we see Millie's growth as well. She is a little bit cosseted and she has to become more independent. And actually, one of the things that changed meaningfully in the book, so we can talk about this more a little bit later, but the movie Gaslight was a little bit of an inspiration for the book. And in the movie Gaslight, the main character, she truly believes her husband that she like is insane. Like he manipulates her into believing that she's insane. And in the first version of this, I think Millie was a little more trusting and accepting of like what her husband was telling her. And I think in the revised version, we see that her journey toward kind of bringing more of an investigative eye to the situation developed a little more quickly. But because of these circumstances, she has to really push herself to question and see things in a new way.
That's so interesting. And I think it gets at one of like the main challenges of writing both women's history and women in historical fiction is that you have to sort of find this balance between the restrictions that were placed on them and also like the ways in which they were able to find agency, whether that's like inside those boundaries or by crossing them, you know. And it's really interesting to see both Sylvia and Millie navigate that in different ways. I would love to talk more about Gaslight because that is one of my favorite movies. It's been a huge sort of touchstone in popular culture lately and in popular discourse. And it's an
Yeah.
anniversary year. So it's like all these great things happening at once. So could you talk a little bit about your own relationship to the film when you first encountered it? And if writing this homage sort of made you reflect on your relationship to it and changed how you feel about it?
So I've always been a fan of classic films, and I going back since I was a kid, but I actually didn't watch Gaslight until I think about when I started thinking about this project in 2017. There was an article that went viral that year about gaslighting. And it, like, even though this is a term that's been in the vernacular for a long time, it really like re-entered it in a bigger way. And I think I just found myself Googling, or like after reading that, wanted to watch the movie that inspired it and kind of understand it. So I went and watched the movie, and obviously Ingrid Bergman is fantastic in everything she does. And so I, definitely found it very inspiring, and definitely planted the seeds of this idea.
Yeah, it is like it's when I saw it, I was really struck by how modern it feels for something that is so old and how menacing it manages to be while still being like, it was made during like the Hays Code and they couldn't like be as explicit
Yeah.
as they always want to. Were there places where you were drawing specific parallels in either character traits between Millie and I forget her character's name, but Ingrid?
Yeah, Paula. Yes. So I think the theme of the heroine being manipulated into believing she's insane to distract from another character's nefarious activities. I think it's like the key relationship there, but there's a few other nods that worked their way in. So in the case of Gaslight, he convinces her she's a kleptomaniac and she keeps like losing and stealing things. And so a few, like one of them is she like steals a painting, and another one is she like loses a brooch that he gave her. And so there's a couple of nods in the book where there is like a painting that goes missing, and there's some earrings that she can't find, is a key plot point in my book as well. So there's a couple of nods there. But I think, and I think they both, did find their way to kind of push back and question what was going on. I think, Paula was a little more accepting of it at first, but she did figure things out in the end. And I think the end, this would be a huge spoiler, but there is another little nod at the end. I'll just say what Paula did, which after her husband manipulated her into believing she was insane, she's holding a knife and she says, "Is this knife even real?" Like, and she's just taunting him with what he had tried how he had tried to trick her.
Yeah, I love that. There's so many cool nods. And the what I love about it too is that it captures the movie's sense of claustrophobia too, which the movie can do like visually too, in a way that like you are writing spaces. So that's like a very interesting challenge. Could you talk about our villain, Charles Turner? He has to walk a really interesting line between being like outright menacing and like charming,
Yeah.
So like, could you talk about writing like I guess how you would say it, either balancing or complicating his character so that, he could still plausibly kind of be I don't know,
Yeah.
function in this world, I guess,
That was probably one of the harder, I think that was something that was addressed in revisions as well, candidly. That was a tricky line to walk, because you have to understand why she's so enamored of him and trusting of him, and how she got sucked in. So you do have to show his charming side and that he does have this big personality. So I mean, I think I, researched kind of like other con artist types in history and just like what their personalities were like. Even like there's like a Ponzi scheme element, like how did that, how did that transpire, and looking at modern Ponzi schemes and things like that too. So just kind of trying to understand that psychology of that person. And I think a big part of it is he really believes his own lies to a degree. Like he's like really selling himself on certain aspects of things. So it was interesting to try and get into that mindset.
Yeah. Ooh, that's a very good point. Yeah. And it does help to explain too why, in cases like this for Millie, for Paula, or for anybody experiencing this, unfortunately, in real life, like those are the reasons probably that you stay around longer than maybe somebody watching from the outside might like suggest you do,
Yeah.
Um,
Yes.
I would love if you could talk about how you achieve your pacing. I mentioned early on that I could not put this book down. Your plotting, in order to maintain that pace, like do you do a lot of planning ahead of time, or do you sort of let the momentum carry you? Like, what is your approach?
Yeah, I do know the big plot points ahead of time, and so I'm always writing toward those. I do think this book is a little more thrillery than The Woman in the Castello. Like there's definitely more of that like imminent danger in the beginning. So I think that just naturally makes it a page turner. And I mean, I think both books are exciting, but I think, there definitely was a lot of danger, and Millie had to physically escape. I think another interesting difference is that she does leave the house, which for a Gothic, a lot of times you stay in the house for like the whole book. But I wanted to show that it wasn't just the house trapping her, it was her circumstances, it was society, it was the laws of the time. And so escaping the house was not actually a true escape. So I wanted to try to keep that pace and that level of threat going after she left the house. And so that was an interesting part of the writing process too.
That's an excellent point. Yeah, because she has like, yeah, a huge portion of New York to feel totally trapped and claustrophobic in, and that is like a very cool thing to achieve. Yeah, this book is so exciting, and I'm so excited to share it with our patrons. Are you working on anything now? What's going on for you? Like what's on your horizon?
So I actually just turned in my third book, The Colony of Lost Souls. I don't know exactly when it will be out yet, but there's another one coming. So good news.
That's great. All right. Well, I hope, you'll consider coming back for that one too, because that sounds really fun. Um, yeah. Thank you so much for joining us. This has been really lovely.
Thank you so much for having me and for your support and for reading. And I hope everyone listening enjoys the book.
Yeah, I think they will. Listeners, you hear that? It's your turn. Please check out Secrets of Rose Briar Hall. By the time that you hear this, it'll be out in the world. So head to your favorite library or independent bookstore, wherever you go for those things. Thanks so much for joining us. It's now time to close this chapter.
It's time to close this chapter of Turn the Page. Join us for the next episode.